Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, the SAS podcast. I'm your host, Dave Markel, coming to you from the Long Valley studio in Washington, Utah. Before I go any further, I want to give a huge shout out to all of the friends, family, colleagues, and acquaintances of Becky Nulle who've tuned in to hear Becky's first appearance on a podcast here on Sexual Assault Survivor Stories. Welcome to the show. Most of you already know the foundation of this podcast, but for those of you who are new here, I want you to know that this show serves a dual purpose. First, it provides a safe space for victims and survivors of rape or sexual assault to share their experiences to facilitate healing. Secondly, it educates listeners on the principles of a trauma-informed response, going beyond superficial understanding to foster effective advocacy and positive action. This is episode 143, and my guest this week, as I mentioned, is Becky Nulle. Becky's story has some historic significance, as well as some important lessons to be learned from the problem of sexual assault and rape from those in positions of trust. Not to mention tons of other insights that Becky is brave and courageous enough to share with all of us. Let's get to it. Here's Becky. Hey, SAS listeners, welcome back for another episode. I am so thrilled to have with me today Becky Nulle. Becky is a victim survivor who suffered through years and years of torturous impact from what happened to her. Becky, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Dave. I'm so grateful for you.
Tell us about yourself.
I am a married woman. I'm a duck mom and a Doberman mom. I live in northern Wisconsin. And I'm working on my bachelor's degree in communications now. And I volunteer a lot with the Hmong community up here in northern Wisconsin.
Oh, that's awesome.
I try to give back because I was saved. I was probably a statistic that changed the statistics.
Tell my audience, if you would, a little bit about how you found the podcast and what you did in response to finding me.
Sure. I was struggling with my story. I just wanted someone who could understand. Doing a search, your name came up and I did the research and I just was in awe of the stories of people who had similar situations, some very similar, some different, but we all had something in common, which was a pain of being unheard at times. I reached out to you through Instagram, through a message, and you were kind enough to respond to me. And I'm just so grateful you did. And I'm just really happy to be here, Dave.
It was thrilling to get your message and to learn about you and what you had been doing in terms of listening to the show. And I'll just go a step further and tell the audience that after we started communicating via Instagram Messenger, I reached out to her via phone call. And we did spend some time together. And as soon as she was telling me about what was going on, and she had already told me a little bit in the messenger texts, it just spoke to me. And I just need my audience to hear your story. Thank you for being willing to do this. Becky, there's so much we could talk about even before we go into your story, but I think it's important for people to just hear that right off the bat and know what happened. And I'll let you give the background and everything, but let me just start by telling you how terribly sorry I am for the experience that you went through and all of the impact that has been going on for years and years, and how that one period of your life really messed life up for you and impacted you in such horrific and torturous ways. You have my deepest empathy.
Thank you, Dave. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Becky, what are you able to tell us about your rape and sexual assaults?
I grew up in a family, late 60s, that was biracial. Dad was Black. Unfortunately, they were neglectful. I was the protector of the family very early on. There was a lot of mistreatment on their part. We were hungry. We were poor. Lights were out. We ended up, when this situation occurred, in a neighborhood on Chicago's northwest side. Chicago is very segregated, or it was very segregated. And even though I'm so fair, I'm very light with weird colored eyes. In the neighborhood I grew up in, I was beaten up a lot. I saw the kids being bused to the school and rocks being thrown at the buses because they were Black. So there was a lot of angst in me, a lot of anger at the time before the incident. Leading right up to the incident, I went to a new school and I was getting beaten up a lot there. I was a freshman at Calvin Park High School. This was a high school that had a mixture of children, and a girl was wanting to beat me up for some reason. And this young man, Darrel, approached me one day and he said he wouldn't let this girl get to me anymore. I didn't know what that meant, but he told me not to worry. I didn't pay any attention. I just said, well, maybe he's going to do something for me. I don't know how. The next day, he was going to wait for me after school and pick me up after school. I thought he was going to give me a ride home. Instead, he took me to his home and we had sex. I wasn't sure what was going on per se with that, but I had been a little active by, I think I was 13. So I just figured I was so dying to have love. And from what I learned at home with my mom and dad, having sex meant love. He took me home and told me to make sure I was at school coming up. It was either the next day or the day after, I can't remember now. We were walking through the hallway and he said, I want you, he grabbed me and we were underneath the stairwell at the Calvin Park High School and he said, look up. He grabbed my chin almost as if I was being shown at a market or something. And I looked up and there was James. I didn't know then that that was James Moffat. He was the principal of the high school. I didn't quite know who he was and what that meant. But I just looked up at him and he looked down at me and Darrel said, all right, let's go. And then I walked to my class. Darrel said that he would pick me up after school again. After school, he picked me up and he took me back home and his friends raped me. There were at least 3 or 4 of them. And when I attempted to leave, Darrel picked me up off the ground. He punched me in the stomach and he choked me while I was off the ground and told me never to attempt to do that again. And then he took me home and asked if this is where my family lived and who was involved there and, you know, who lived there. And I just said my mom and dad. And I was very young. I was only 13 when this happened. And I wasn't sure why he was asking that, but it scared me just a wee bit. A couple of days later, I went to school and Darrel said, look for a note from me. And I didn't understand what was going on. And Darrel said, just look for a note from me. I was in a class. Somebody knocked on the door and gave the teacher a note. And I was told to come to the front of the class. And then I was told that James Moffat wanted to see me. So I went to James Moffat's office. There was a receptionist in front of her, like a secretary. She told me to sit down, that Dr. Moffat would see me in a moment. I went into the room. When he opened up the door, he told me I could have a seat on the sofa. I looked, Darrel was there sitting nearby. He said, Dr. Moffat wants to talk to you or wants to spend some time with you here. And he told me rather, to take off my clothes. At this point, I was terrified because of what had happened at his house, at Darrel's house, before this incident. I didn't want to. And I said, I don't want to. And he said, do what I said. And then Dr. Moffat said, you can go into the closet and take them off. And I went into the closet and I looked around and I didn't know what to do. And I wanted to cry because wasn't what I wanted to do. I came out after I'd taken off my clothes and Darrel said, Dr. Moffat is going to protect you from that girl that keeps trying to beat you up if you do these things. And Dr. Moffat proceeded to have, he put his mouth on my private parts and he was doing something with Darrel. I wasn't sure exactly what was going on, but they were engaged in some type of act. Before I came out, I could tell. It was disgusting. I was ashamed and I felt hopeless at the time because I had no choices. I was afraid of getting beat up, but I was afraid of not doing what Darrel wanted me to do. I was just a 13-year-old skinny little girl who respected authority figures and didn't know much about what was going on. It wasn't sex for love there. I guess that was for protection. It was one of the most demeaning, because there was the rape before, the couple of days before at Darrel's house. And I couldn't remember if it was one or two times, but his friends just took total advantage of me. And I was so angry, seething angry, because no one had protected me all my life. And I knew no one was going to protect me now. So after the incident happened with Dr. Moffat, and I got my clothes on and I stood up, Darrel was getting his clothes on and Dr. Moffat was adjusting his clothes. And I was just looking around his office and looking at myself, feeling shamed and disgusted. Darrel said, Dr. Moffat will now protect you and you won't get, in any trouble, and no one will hurt you anymore and nobody will beat you up or jump you. Dr. Moffat's got you, I promise you. And Dr. Moffat told me I would be fine. I would be safe now. So I said, okay. And then I walked out of the office. Dr. Moffat's assistant looked at me strangely, and I didn't know what she was looking at me for, but I feel like she knew what was going on. After school, I was able to just go home and just sit on my bed and think about what had happened. I went to school the next day, and I believe I talked to a teacher. I remember she was friendly to me and she was kind. And I needed that because I was at the school alone mostly in my mind. And she said, what's going on? You seem a little different today. And I said, the worst things are happening. I said, Dr. Moffat is touching me and he did some things to me. And she said, what? And I said, he's done things and I don't have any choice because they're going to beat me up anyway. So I don't know what to do. And she's asked me to come to her office later. Later never came because when I was in the women's bathroom, this girl that I was afraid of came in and another girl followed behind her. And the one girl held me while the other girl punched me repeatedly in the stomach and then cut me in the neck. I wasn't sure if she stabbed me or cut me with her fingernails, but there was a lot of blood. It was right down the hallway from Dr. Moffat's office. I screamed. I was screaming bloody murder. Finally, somebody came in and the girls scattered. And then I ran into Dr. Moffat's office because I was angry. I was seething. I was told he was going to protect me. And when I went into the office, the same assistant was sitting there and she said, can I help you? And I said, I want to see Dr. Moffat. He told me he was going to protect me. And she said, what are you talking about? And she said, Dr. Moffat is in a meeting. And then his door opened and he said, what's going on? And I said, you lied to me. You said you were going to protect me. And I was bleeding. And he said, what happened? And I explained to him. And then they called my mom. I felt bad for bothering her because she was trying to keep a job. Eventually she came and I never went back to that school again. I just put it all behind me. But after that, my grandfather died. And I don't know if it's because my mom was just habitually late or because we're Black and white kids and they didn't want people to know my mother had biracial children. We came to the back of the funeral home to see my grandfather. I got pissed again. After that, I went to a different school and I hung out with some people. And one night I ended up meeting somebody and he brought me to a crack house. We stayed at the crack house and did things that a little girl shouldn't be doing. He left me there when he went out. And I thought I should probably be home. I wondered if anybody was even looking for me. But I got out of the crack house and I walked around and I went to a little restaurant, little coffee shop. And a woman sat down next to me while I was thinking of if I should go home or not. I was still thinking in my head that if I stayed away from home, maybe Darrel wouldn't find me or my mom or dad. I had a lot of stressors on me. She said, well, I have this place around the corner, and if you come with me, you'll be safe. She loaned me some money to eat because I was always really hungry because food wasn't something that came easy at my house. So I said, okay, that sounds good. Let's go to your house. So I followed her to her house. But it really wasn't a house. It was a basement that was dark. And I wasn't sure I should go down there with her. But after the principal and what had happened with Darrel, I had no sunshine anyway. I never loved myself. I was disgusting. I was this black and white child that nobody loved. My cousins were told not to come to the house, so they couldn't see us. So this just contributed to me not loving myself more. So back to me going downstairs to this place, I said, "Your lights aren't on." And she said, "Oh, I'll get them." And I walked with her behind her. I remember her name was Mama T. I said, "Mama T, where's your furniture?" She said, "Just hold on a minute. I'm gonna get the light." And then the door closed behind me, and a man was there. And Mama T told him, "Hey, Tony, this is Angel." Because I had given a fake name, I wanted to not be Becky anymore. I wanted to be somebody new. He said, "Angel, nice to meet you." We sat down on milk crates. They passed me something to drink in a cup, and it made me feel good. It was warm. I was different then. I wasn't Becky, the person who was sent home from school for smelling, for being black and white. I wasn't Becky who was gang raped. I wasn't Becky that was touched by the disgusting principal. I was warm inside. I was new and fresh, and I had this warm feeling of alcohol running through me, and I was okay for a minute, sitting with Mama T and Tony in this empty basement that had no furniture on the west side of Chicago. They gave me some more of the red liquid, which I'm thinking was wine, and Mama T started dancing. And I think I started dancing to ABBA. And then all of a sudden, the room was spinning. They had put on a candle. I was dancing. I was a dancing queen. I was no longer Dirty Becky. I was Angel, new Angel. I was clean now. Nobody else knew me. And then I stopped spinning and I threw up and laid on the floor. And when I woke up, Tony was on top of me doing things that he shouldn't do to a little girl. From then, I was on the streets for a couple months in the west side of Chicago doing despicable, horrible things to prove how much I hated myself. I think there was a photo of me on the television. People were looking for me, and someone found me. And then I ended up in Chicago Children's Memorial Hospital for a couple weeks to be looked over. And I ended up going to another hospital. It was like a therapeutic, Chicago Lakeshore Hospital, to get treatment with my family to see if there could be some type of healing. I was supposed to be out in 3 months, but I think my family forgot to pick me up. And I ended up staying for another 3 months. When I got out, I went home. My mother tried to hug me and I flinched and I ran away again. But I ran back to the hospital because I had 3 meals a day and people cared about me. After this incident, my family moved and I stayed in Chicago. I got a job and I think I was at my 6th high school by now, or 5th high school. And things were starting to come out about the principal. This was where I feel like the real assault or rape happened, in my opinion. Because I told the teacher what happened, she was able to open up a story. I don't know, with the Chicago Board of Ed or the police. And I went in, they were picking me up from school in a police car or undercover, because I was really scared to tell my story because I didn't want my mom and dad to be hurt, even though they were so neglectful. When everything happened, Dr. Moffat was being represented by Ann Burke. I went to court. It was either the state's attorney that was picking me up. I remember I met him later and he was like on all these boards all over Illinois. I think his name was Jack O'Malley. And I had an attorney who found me and helped me too. But going to court and discussing this was scary because the day I had to do my deposition, Darrel was in the chair handcuffed. I was still scared of Darrel, but I did my deposition and everything had gone on. And going to court, Ann Burke, I don't know how she found me. It was my turn to testify. And she said, "Becky, come over here. Dr. Moffat would love to have lunch with you, Dr. Moffat, and I would love to have you for lunch." And I was just a little girl that was going to court by myself. Nobody was there with me, and I was petrified. And anyway, in the end, they convicted Dr. Moffat of molesting 4 boys and 1 girl, and I was the girl. But the part that was worse than all of the assaults was that he didn't serve any time. He was taken off the sexual predators list. And I developed a severe anger and alcohol problem because of my anger. I feel like I was gaslit through this whole experience because I didn't believe, even though we'd settled with the Board of Education. There was a story written in the Tribune, I think, or somewhere, somehow. I thought I had AIDS because they said Dr. Moffat might have AIDS. So I think at 14, I was looking out the back window of a car, wondering if anybody was following us. And I forgot to mention, Darrel did get a hold of me and threatened to hurt my mother and father. So I retracted my story because even though they were neglectful, I still loved them. But in the end, the records documented at Chicago Lakeshore Hospital what happened. I knew what happened. Dr. Moffat knew what happened. But the city of Chicago swept it under the rug. Ann Burke represented a principal, a pervert, a predator, a pedophile, and went on to head the Chicago Department of Family and Children's Services. And then she went on to become Illinois Supreme Court judge. But her husband is in federal prison now, Ed Burke. I guess I've got my retribution. So I've served my life sentence of anger. I had severe anger for many years, but I'm now working through that. I finally found healing through brain spotting, and I've gone through probably no less than 35 therapists. There was severe neglect on my parents, but I still loved them, and I know they did the best they could, raising Black and white children during a time when segregation and busing wasn't easy for them. It was hard, and I'm just starting to love myself at this age. I'm finishing a book. I have a publisher who's going to publish it, and the book has some fun. I have a habit of making light of situations that probably aren't funny, but it's life.
Becky, it's amazing that you've made it through telling this story. As I mentioned before, I feel so bad for you, and I'm so sorry that all of this happened. This was all while you were 13. Had you, at that point in time, started taking drugs, or was this something that was forced on you?
This was forced on me. I was, oddly enough, I always only wanted to be a good girl. I wanted to go to college. My father, my stepfather, I didn't know until later, he was an alcoholic. I never drank until the incident after the principal down in the basement with Mama T and Tony. As many bottles as my sister and I would play find the bottle, but I never drank. I just wanted to be a good little girl. Yeah. I wanted to be loved. I had scores. My mom was so proud of me. She said, you scored 100 on the Iowa test, which I don't know what that means, but I was smart, but I didn't have anybody to nurture it and water that plant. That's why I'm attending school now.
Which has to feel good. I'm really happy for you. When we first talked during that vetting phone call, you talked a lot about the impact that this had on you as far as what it did to your life and for how long those impacts lasted. Are you able to tell us in some detail some of the impacts that all of these horrific experiences had on your life and what it did to your thought processes, your reactions, your relationships with your parents and other people, all of that? How did you cope? What were you doing to make it through the day?
Well, after the incident, I was lucky to find a wonderful attorney. He found me, Alan. I went on to become a legal assistant, and I worked in law for many years. I ended up developing a drinking problem, and I coped by numbing. Alan got me a job. It's funny, he's on a series called Jury Duty now. He became an actor. It's hilarious as all shit. I love him. Anyway, but back to working, he got me a job at a law firm, and I ended up having a desire to work in law field. And I worked in law for 20 some odd years, but I drank to numb the hatred for myself and the hatred for what had happened to me. And then I was angry. And relationships didn't work for me. Anger was a survival tool. I didn't realize it's a survival mechanism. If you ask my poor husband, now I'm married, and I developed a really good arm with throwing Le Creuset pans. But I tried to get help. I went to AA, and I got sober for a while, but AA wasn't my thing. I had 2 OWIs for drinking while intoxicated, and I've had trouble when I wasn't even drinking. Most recently, after my mom died last year, and it took everything from me. I was so angry at my siblings because I had to help. Anyway, even sober, I had anger issues. So last year, I threw a bowl of chili at my husband, and I didn't realize all these things were hiding in my body. All of the trauma was stuck in places. And I had to find healing, or I was going to lose my husband, and most importantly, lose myself. So I sought a woman out. She wasn't even taking new clients. And I kind of did a backdoor thing. I called around up in northern Wisconsin. It was hard to find. I was looking. I literally had been to 35 therapists, and nobody could help me. So I finally called this therapist who saw sexual abusers or like pedophiles. And I asked her, who do the victims of the pedophiles go to? And she gave me a name. And she said, tell me your story. And I did. And she said, I want you to call this person, and I want you to get back to me. So I called this person, Jan, and I've been working with Jan since my incident with the police up here in northern Wisconsin after I threw a bowl of chili. And Jan, through brain spotting, has helped me learn to love myself. And I am healing now.
Becky, this whole thing with Dr. Moffat, your principal, it became statewide news when he was accused of molesting students, including you, and you said 4 other boys. He was, I believe, eventually arrested and went to trial. But there was a huge cover-up that was attempted through the school district, correct?
That is correct, Dave. Dr. Moffat, unbeknownst to me, at one point was number 2 in charge of the Chicago Board of Education, the city. He was at downtown Chicago's office. He was corporate. He was not a principal. And he was accused of sexually harassing students. And he was so powerful that they didn't get rid of him. They demoted him to what I call putting him in a candy store full of children. When he came to Calvin Park, I did a lot of research after this because a lot of the things were wiped away and I couldn't find stories and I didn't believe what happened to me. I thought I was crazy and it felt like I was not validated. When he was convicted, I don't believe he served over a year's time. I could never find out how much time he served, but it was under a year, in my opinion, and they took him off the sexual predators list. They made my story, it felt like I was diminished. And that's where my anger started. I just seized. I mean, I was angry as a young girl, too. I was hungry. There's a story in my book about a woman called Cornbread that my mother left me with, and she did despicable things to me when I was 5. But at least with what happened with the principal, a figure in authority, a powerful figure that they knew about, that they should have protected me from. They wiped it under the rug like I didn't matter. So not only did not matter at home, not really matter from my grandparents, I didn't matter to the city of Chicago or the Board of Education.
You've sent me a lot of news articles and a magazine article too, I think. From what I read, there was just appeal after appeal after appeal after appeal on his part through his legal team, his attorney, and this drug on for years. Am I right?
That is correct. And hearing about it, and even the movie, there was a movie that was made. I think it focused mainly on the teacher. I think they portray me in there and they say I retract my story, but they don't explain that it was because Darrel threatened to hurt my mom and dad. And if anybody knows me, I probably would have taken a bullet for one of them. But it was also taken out of, it wasn't filmed in the city of Chicago in a very diverse, I think the school was half Hispanic, but it was a very diverse school. I think it was filmed in British Columbia and it was bizarre. I don't think he served, it was because of his association with Ann Burke and Ed Burke that he was, in my eyes, not punished.
What brought to light his actions against you and these other boys? How did that come out in the first place?
I told the teacher the day that she saw me, a teacher that I found to be warm, because I always gravitate towards women or maternal women because I didn't have that at home. I told this teacher what was occurring, and that's what broke open the stories from what I understand.
So she then, in turn, either went to social services or the school board or law enforcement. Somewhere this came to light and an investigation started. Do you know how long from the time it was that you told this teacher till the time that it was finally wrapped up in the court system?
I don't know how long, but I do know that from what I understand, Dr. Moffat had her transferred because I was on the run after everything. I had left the school and I was on the streets, and I was almost in that Lakeshore Children's Hospital for close to almost a year. But during that time, I didn't know, but he had her transferred, and she went on to conduct interviews with other children, and he kept trying to get her in trouble and cover up. I think he promised Darrel a basketball scholarship. I don't know the timeline, unfortunately, but he promised. There was always promises of monetary things. In my case, it was protection.
Protection that didn't even happen. Whatever became of Dr. Moffat?
Dead, 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 under the ground dead.
Was that natural causes?
Yes, although I wanted to kill him. I looked for him for years. I wanted to kill him. It was a strange adolescent thing, but I felt like my voice wasn't heard and that I didn't matter. And I almost started to believe it didn't occur. It wasn't just Dr. Moffat, though. He was just part of the Darrel, the principal, and the Tony and Mama T. But then again, the city of Chicago and the Board of Education for the city of Chicago, they were no better. They were no better than Tony handing me and then, oh my, there was so much. I mean, I forgot to mention that Red and Tony had a shootout over me on the west side of Chicago. I was a prime property as a little girl on the streets of Chicago. I saw the glass breaking and Mama T was pushing me to get into a car, but it was all of the culmination started from the neglect from my parents. If they'd have seen maybe that I was being neglected or that I was afraid, I had been beaten up in grammar school because I was Black. I mean, my mom knew. She was picking me up from the hospital with shoe imprints on my face. I was prime picking for a groomer like Darrel and Dr. Moffat. Prime.
This then led to you writing a book. Tell us about how that came about. What inspired you to write, and what's that journey been? And then if you could, tell us where that's going. You said that you're now able to give us the title, and you just signed with a publisher. This will be out in the not too distant future. I think you said a month and a half or so. Talk about that if you would.
Thank you, Dave. I'm so proud of this. What led to the book is who I call my voodoo queen. And I say that because this lady who I talked about before, Jan, she specializes in brain spotting. All of those traumas and anger that I'd been holding on to in different parts of my body, she brought them out of me. She told me to journal. I don't really want to journal, but I guess I've been going to her twice a month since my mom died. She'll leave it to my mom to go out in style. Friday the 13th in September of last year, she died. I knew I needed help because I wasn't getting over the anger. And somehow I knew that I needed to find a way to heal. And I wrote a book. It's called Anger, Alcohol, and Healing Through Brain Spotting. I'm hoping it will help people that are dealing with traumas because it has changed me. I've lost 60 pounds. No, I am not on a diet. No, I didn't lose it physically, but my mind is free. The voodoo queen, she's going to laugh because I said, how did you do it? I've been holding on to this anger for all these years. And all she does is we go into the session and we think about where I'm feeling the anger, the shame, those disgusting feelings, whether it's from my grandfather calling me a little shit, or Darrel holding me up and beating me, or Red, the pimp in a crack house, and me begging him after he stole me back from the other pimp, Tony, me begging him to tell me he loved me. All of these traumas were stuck in me. And Jan Spangler, I'm free to use her name, she has helped me heal. And she tells me, you come in here and you work, because I can't live this life holding on to this weight that was in my shoulders, that was in my stomach, of all the pain that I'd been holding on to. This brain spotting, it's like if you don't work through these traumas, they just stay with you and they squeeze out through the side. And whether it's through throwing things at your husband or yelling at the cashier. But I'm excited. I wrote the book because I wanted to see what really happened to me. I didn't believe, because of how everything was swept under the rug, I really didn't believe anything that big happened to me. I thought, everybody's had something. But when I looked back at some of the stories that had happened with my family, some were funny, some were not so funny. But growing up Black and white back in the late 60s with a white mother and a Black father, and going to an all-Black church and being hungry and watching other people eat, that was a way that I was angry. There was just lots of traumas. I hadn't dealt with them. I had no one. I went through everybody. And it wasn't until I found Jan that I knew I could do it. And then one night I just started writing. And then I had like 35,000 words. And then I let somebody read it. And they were like, oh my God, you made me cry. You made me laugh. And I feel lighter. And I'm just grateful that I could get it out. I could never write about it before Jan came into my life. There were struggles. I got stuck through the brain spotting, and she had to kind of snap me out of it, because you really go into deep parts of your brain that are untouched. She calls it the shit file. And I went into the shit file and I got stuck there, but I'm not there anymore. My marriage is saved. And this book, I'm hoping this helps parents, children, maybe biracial children, maybe children that are worried they're getting beat up. Maybe they can reach out. The children that are bullied, they're easy prey for these assholes out there. They're easy prey. I was easy prey. I was neglected and nobody protected me. I was the protector.
Powerful stuff, Becky.
Thank you.
So the book will come out in a month and a half or so.
Yes.
I want to help publicize that release. I want people to know about it. I want people to buy the book. You were telling me earlier that you can do a pre-order, and you're going to send me the information on how to pre-order the book, and I will put that in the episode notes.
Yes, I sure will.
Great.
And if they can't find it, I have a website, beckynulle.com, that they can reach out to. I can forward that information to them. I have the best publisher in the world.
That's so good. Becky, once this recording is done and we hang up, all of what we've been through is going to play in your mind, and it's going to bring back a lot of things that you've probably buried in your memory and in your thought processes. How will you deal with those as they come to the surface tonight and tomorrow and for the next several days and weeks? What will you do to get through all of that?
I am going to eat 2 pints of Ben & Jerry's chocolate fudge brownie ice cream, because I'm a new person. I'm going to walk my dog and love my husband and be grateful that I'm here alive to tell my story and hopefully help somebody else. I hope my story helps somebody, Dave.
That's why you wanted to do this, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And I'm so grateful. I know that this story is going to reach thousands of people, and it's going to have an amazing impact, Becky. I'm so thankful for your willingness to be here. I can't thank you enough.
Did we do okay?
You did amazing, and I'm so thrilled that you persevered and pushed through. I could tell this was really hard to talk about and to get through, but you did amazing, and I'm super proud of you. Honored to have you on the show. Honored to call you part of the SAS family. Thank you for letting Sexual Assault Survivor Stories be your platform. It's an honor to have had you as a guest.
All right, Dave.
Thanks
you have again. A grateful day. I'm heading to my freezer to find my ice cream.
All right. Thank you. Enjoy it.
All right. Take good care, Dave.
You bet. See you, Becky.
Bye-bye.
That does it for another episode of Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, the SAS podcast. I want to extend my sincere and heartfelt gratitude to Becky Nulle for joining us today and sharing her bravery and courageous fortitude. Becky, your contribution is truly appreciated, and I'm honored to have had you on the show. You're an amazing example and an amazing guest. For my listeners, my call to action this week is for you to share Becky's episode with everyone in your circle of influence. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to this podcast on your favorite platform, give the show a 5-star rating, and become a follower of Sexual Assault Survivor Stories on Instagram. All of this helps spread the message of bringing justice to victims and survivors of rape and sexual assault. Another great way to do this is to start by believing. Whenever you hear a victim of rape or sexual assault, tell their story. Because we all know someone whose life has been impacted by rape or sexual assault. Please be sure to join me next week for another powerful episode of Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, the SAS Podcast. We'll see you next week.